The Wild West wasn't powered by just grit and whiskey. Behind the saloon doors and dusty trails, drugs coursed through the lives of settlers, outlaws, and miners alike. Opium dens buzzed with activity, their smoky interiors drawing gamblers and fugitives into an intoxicating haze. Laudanum bottles, sold as miracle cures, became both lifelines and death sentences in mining towns and frontier cabins. Cocaine-fueled cattle drives stretched across the plains, while cannabis flourished in unregulated pastures, its use spreading among laborers and cowboys. The Wild West's drug culture wasn't hidden. It thrived openly, shaping the chaotic rhythm of a lawless era. Opium's journey into the Wild West hit its stride during the California Gold Rush when thousands of Chinese immigrants brought their labor and their habits across the Pacific. By the 1850s, opium dens were cropping up in mining towns. In San Francisco's Chinatown, narrow alleys led to shadowy rooms filled with low tables, bamboo mats, and the heavy aroma of burnt opium resin. These dens became gathering places, not just for Chinese laborers, but for gamblers, outlaws, and the curious, all chasing the warm euphoria promised by the poppy. The scene inside a den wasn't subtle. Smokers reclined lazily, cradling long-stem pipes. Nearby, attendants, often dressed in silk robes, stoked small lamps to heat the opium, preparing dose after dose. The dense smoke swirled through the dimly lit rooms, mingling with the murmur of voices and the occasional outburst of laughter. These dens were not tucked away in secret. They thrived openly in cities like Denver and Portland, where areas like Hop Alley housed dozens of these establishments. By the 1870s, opium smoking wasn't confined to the Chinese community. News of its effects rippled through mining camps and railroad outposts, tempting settlers weary from the punishing frontier life. Some came out of curiosity, while others, battered by injury or heartbreak, sought refuge. The law rarely intervened. Officials either ignored the dens or actively protected them in exchange for hefty bribes. One of the most notorious hubs was in Virginia City, Nevada, where den owners catered to miners flush with gold and gamblers nursing their losses. Reports of all-night sessions where customers smoked themselves into a stupor filtered through newspapers, stirring a mix of fascination and condemnation. The opium trade grew with every passing train carrying fresh laborers and fresh supply. By the 1880s, American custom officials noted that opium imports had skyrocketed from a few thousand pounds to hundreds of thousands of pounds. The dens thrived in the shadows of this booming trade. For many, they were a place to escape the harshness of the frontier. For others, they became a trap, their lives consumed by the haze of the pipe. Laudanum didn't slip into the Wild West quietly. It barreled through, touted as the solution to every ailment pioneers encountered. It was a staple in doctors' kits and general stores, a dark, bitter liquid made of opium dissolved in alcohol. It eased away the agony of childbirth, quieted crying infants, and dulled the unrelenting pain of gunshot wounds and broken bones. But it was far from harmless. Sally Talbot's death in Cheyenne, Wyoming in 1873 was a grim reminder of laudanum's dangers. Only 21, she was found lifeless in a boarding house, her empty bottle beside her. Talbot wasn't alone in her fate. In Virginia City, Nevada, Laura Steele and Ida Vernon met similar ends. These women, worn down by hard lives in the roughest towns in the West, found solace in laudanum's grip until it became their undoing. Laudanum's accessibility made it a constant presence. Gamblers swigged it to steady their nerves before high-stakes games. Ranchers used it to numb the aches of long days, and exhausted mothers dosed their children for peace and quiet. Eleanor Dumont, known as Madame Mustache for her striking appearance and skill at the card table, succumbed to an overdose after losing a fortune in Bodie, California. The drug's pull was undeniable. Even celebrities of the day fell into its clutches. Mattie Blaylock, Wyatt Earp's common-law wife, became dependent on laudanum during their time together. Her addiction spiraled after Wyatt Earp left her, culminating in her death in 1888 after consuming a fatal mix of laudanum and alcohol. Writers like Edgar Allan Poe and gamblers alike spoke of the drug's ability to transport them beyond the hardships of their realities, only to return them broken. The frontier's unforgiving nature made laudanum a cruel master. It provided relief at a steep cost, creating addicts who traded pain for dependence. The harshness of the West was often amplified by the very substance meant to ease it, leaving behind a trail of overdoses and shattered lives. Cocaine didn't creep into the Wild West. It erupted into public life with a wave of enthusiasm. By the late 1800s, it was a household remedy, marketed as a cure for exhaustion, depression, and even indigestion. What began as a medical marvel turned into one of the most widely consumed stimulants of the frontier. The drug's path to fame started in 1863 when French chemist Angelo Mariani introduced Vin Mariani, a wine infused with coca leaves celebrated for its invigorating effects. Each glass delivered a sharp jolt of vitality, and demand for the beverage skyrocketed, with the likes of Pope Leo XIII endorsing it. American entrepreneurs followed Mariani's lead. In 1886, John Stith Pemberton of Atlanta introduced French wine coca, a concoction he advertised as a nerve tonic. When prohibition laws banned alcohol sales, Pemberton reformulated the drink into a syrup, the birth of Coca-Cola. Early versions contained an estimated 9 milligrams of cocaine per serving, enough to fuel the energy levels of laborers, cowboys, and entrepreneurs navigating the demands of frontier life. Cocaine was sold in every conceivable form. Lozenges, powders, cigarettes, and injectable solutions were readily available in pharmacies and through catalog orders. Farmers in isolated regions kept cocaine syrups on hand to push through grueling harvests. Ranchers relied on the drug to combat fatigue during cattle drives that stretched for weeks under punishing conditions. The drug's reach wasn't limited to physical laborers. Denver's urban elite sipped cocaine-laden tonics during high society gatherings, while gamblers in boomtowns sought it to sharpen their focus. Doctors administered it liberally as a local anesthetic, further popularizing its use among settlers. The allure of cocaine wasn't all glamour. Addiction spread quietly, and some accounts told of settlers experiencing paranoia or violent outbursts after prolonged use. By the 1890s, cocaine had become an indispensable part of Western life, its effects rippling through saloons, work camps, and parlors alike. It wasn't just a drug of indulgence, it was a tool for survival and an escape from the relentless hardships of the frontier. Cannabis wove itself into the fabric of the Wild West with surprising ease. Initially introduced as hemp for its durable fiber, it quickly found a new role in frontier life. Mexican laborers fleeing political turmoil in the 19th century brought knowledge of cannabis as a recreational substance. By the mid-1800s, it was flourishing in the wild, spreading across fields and pastures where it required little cultivation. The open landscapes of Texas, in particular, became an unregulated ground for cannabis growth and use. Displaced Mexican laborers were among the first to use cannabis for its psychoactive effects, often sharing it with African-American cowboys. These cannabis cowboys would gather after long days herding cattle or working irrigation projects, passing rolled sleeves under the vast frontier sky. The drug's calming effects provided relief from the constant physical strain and unpredictability of life on the range. Now, cannabis wasn't confined to the trails. In western towns, it gained popularity as an alternative to tobacco. The plant was cheaper and often grew roadside, ready for harvest by anyone willing to collect it. Farmers and ranchers used it to relax after grueling workdays, while miners consumed it to ease the exhaustion of digging for gold. In urban areas, cannabis took on a more exotic appeal. By the 1870s, hashish parlors were opening in cities like New Orleans and San Francisco. Decorated with Middle Eastern motifs, these establishments catered to adventurous thrill seekers. One famous account from New York described a hashish hell where patrons reclined on cushions, inhaling from hookahs as they indulged in surreal hallucinations. Cannabis use spread rapidly in the frontier's lawless environment, where regulation was almost non-existent. Its reputation as a harmless vice allowed it to coexist with harsher substances like opium and cocaine. By the time anti-narcotic laws began to take hold decades later, cannabis had already cemented itself as a fixture of frontier culture, its impact lingering in the myths and stories of the Wild West. The Wild West didn't have a pharmacist's restraint or a regulator's hand when it came to drugs. Patent medicines dominated the market, their promises of miraculous cures splashed across bold, colorful labels. These concoctions flowed freely through every general store, pitched at travelers from wagons doubling as mobile pharmacies. Snake oil salesmen, masters of theatrical persuasion, performed on makeshift stages, claiming their bottles could cure everything from tuberculosis to rheumatism. In the hands of desperate settlers, these medicines became lifelines. Yet their ingredients told another story. Many of these elixirs contain potent narcotics like opium, cocaine, and cannabis, often mixed with alcohol or chloroform. A rancher nursing his aching back might swig a concoction laced with opium to ease his pain, unaware he was taking steps toward addiction. Parents gave soothing syrups packed with morphine to restless children, silencing cries but risking their health in the process. Traveling medicine shows turned frontier towns into stages for spectacle. Crowds gathered to watch charismatic salesmen, their voices booming as they extolled the virtues of bottles filled with mystery. Testimonials were delivered with dramatic flair. A man claimed he had been cured of paralysis after a single dose. A woman swore her consumption was reversed. Behind the performances were bottles filled with narcotics, sold in staggering quantities. In mining towns, patent medicines became the solution for every ailment. Cough syrups were a favorite among miners who spent days inhaling dust in claustrophobic tunnels. When gamblers sat at saloon tables for marathon games, they passed around cocaine tonics for sharp focus and stamina. Meanwhile, women suffering from nervous ailments turned to laudanum, sold under charming names like Dr. McMahon's elixir of opium. The side effects were devastating. Settlers seeking relief often fell into dependence. Addiction crept into communities already burdened by isolation and survival struggles. By the time the Pure Food and Drug Act arrived in 1906, the damage was evident. The unregulated chaos of the frontier's medicine cabinet had fueled an era of relief and ruin, leaving behind stories of resilience and destruction in equal measure. Thanks for watching Nutty Productions. What other historical drugs do you want to learn about? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the bell, share this video with a friend, and all that good stuff to stay up to date on all the nutty stories from humanity's past.